Picture this. You're at a family dinner and your uncle, the one, leans across the table and says, "You're still renting? You're just throwing money away every month." And everyone nods. Your mom nods, your cousin nods, even the dog seems disappointed in you. Here's the thing, though. What if your uncle is wrong? What if the single most repeated piece of financial advice in American history, buy, don't rent, renting is just burning cash, is actually built on math that doesn't hold up the way people think it does? I'm not saying buying a home is bad. I'm saying the reason most people buy a home is based on a calculation they've never actually run. My name's Alex, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, personal finance, and why some people build wealth effortlessly while others stay stuck. Make sure to subscribe if you want to understand the real mechanics behind financial freedom. So where did this idea even come from, that renting is throwing money away? It's worth understanding the history here, because this belief didn't emerge from a spreadsheet. It was in large part a marketing campaign. After World War II, the U.S. government, in partnership with the mortgage industry, aggressively promoted homeownership as the cornerstone of the American dream. The 30-year fixed mortgage was practically invented as a policy tool to stimulate the economy. What followed was decades of cultural messaging that turned buying a home from a financial decision into a moral one. And that's where it gets psychologically interesting. Once something becomes tied to identity, to being a responsible adult, a good parent, someone who's making it, we stop questioning the math. We just feel it. Renting feels like failure. Buying feels like arriving. But feelings aren't a financial plan. Okay, let's actually run the numbers, because this is where it gets surprising. Think about it this way. Let's say you buy a $400,000 home. You put 20% down. That's $80,000 out of pocket on day one. Your mortgage is on $320,000 at, let's say, 7% interest over 30 years. Your monthly payment is roughly $2,130. Over 30 years, you'll pay about $767,000 total for a $400,000 house, nearly double. But that's not even the full picture, because here's what people forget to add: property taxes, typically 1 to 1.5% of the home's value per year, homeowner's insurance, maintenance costs, and financial planners generally estimate you should budget about 1% of your home's value annually just for upkeep, HOA fees if they apply, and transaction costs, real estate commissions, closing costs, which can eat 8 to 10% of the home's value when you eventually sell. When Yale economist Robert Shiller, who literally won a Nobel Prize for his work on asset prices, analyzed U.S. home values from 1915 to 2015, he found that after adjusting for inflation, real home prices rose by less than 0.5% per year on average. Not 10%, not 7%, less than 0.5%. Now compare that to the stock market. The S&P 500 has returned roughly 7% annually after inflation over the long term. So the $80,000 down payment you locked into a house, if you'd invested it instead, historically, it could have grown to around $600,000 over 30 years. I'm not saying that's what you should do. I'm saying that's the trade-off you're making, and most people making it have never seen that math. Now, I know what you're thinking. Alex, but home equity. I build equity when I pay a mortgage. When I rent, I have nothing to show for it. And look, that's fair. That's not wrong. Equity is real. But here's what's crazy. In the early years of a mortgage, the vast majority of your monthly payment goes to interest, not principal. In year one on that $320,000 loan, you're paying about $1,870 a month in interest and only $260 towards actually owning more of your home. For the first decade, you are, by any honest definition, mostly paying the bank, not building equity. The renter, meanwhile, has flexibility. If a job opportunity opens across the country, they can move. If the neighborhood declines, they can leave. If interest rates crash and rents get more competitive, they benefit. Flexibility has an economic value that almost never shows up in the renting versus buying conversation. There's also what economists call the opportunity cost of equity. The money locked in your home equity is essentially an interest-free loan back to yourself. It's not liquid, it's not growing at market rates, it's just sitting there in your walls. Here's where I want to slow down, because I think the math is actually the easier part of this conversation. The harder part is understanding why this topic makes us so emotional. And I think it comes down to something psychologists call loss aversion, the idea that losing something feels about twice as painful as gaining something feels good. When we pay rent, we experience it as loss every single month. It's visible, it's recurring, and it feels wasteful. But when we pay mortgage interest, which is often more money going to the bank, we don't feel it the same way because it's bundled with the story of ownership. We're not bad at math. We're human. We're wired to anchor to narratives, not spreadsheets. And the most dangerous financial decisions aren't the ones where we have no information. They're the ones where we think we already know the answer, so we stop asking questions. The question isn't, should I rent or buy, as if one is universally smarter. The real question is, given my income, my timeline, my local market, and my alternatives for that capital, which decision actually builds my wealth faster? That's a different question, and it has a different answer for almost everyone. To be clear, because I don't want hate mail from realtors, there are absolutely scenarios where buying wins decisively. If you're in a market where home prices are reasonable relative to rents, economists measure this with something called the price-to-rent ratio, buying can be a powerful forced savings mechanism. If you plan to stay in one place for at least 7 to 10 years, the transaction costs start to make sense. If you're the kind of person who would spend invested money rather than leave it growing, and most people are, honestly, then the forced savings argument for homeownership is genuinely compelling. And if you buy in a high-demand, supply-constrained market at the right time, the appreciation can blow the historical averages out of the water. Home ownership can absolutely be a great financial decision. The problem isn't buying. It's the problem buying because you feel like you're supposed to, without ever running your own numbers. So the next time you're at that family dinner and your uncle gives you the look, you don't have to argue with him, you don't have to convince anyone, but you owe it to yourself to actually do the math. Not the cultural math, not the emotional math, the real math with your actual numbers, your actual market, your actual alternatives. Because here's the thing, the people who build real wealth don't just follow the conventional wisdom, they interrogate it, they ask why. They run the numbers themselves, and sometimes the answer is, actually, my uncle is right, I should buy. And sometimes the answer is, I'm going to keep renting, keep investing the difference, and be more financially free in 10 years than most homeowners will be